I'm going to show you how to assemble this robot chassis. This is the main robot body, which is a plastic plexiglass. There are the two yellow motors mounted on the back side with the two wheels attached to them. Then also on the back side, there's this battery holder for holding full AA batteries, a on-off switch, and then the back wheel. Here are the parts that I needed. You got your two wheels, you got your plexiglass body, and then this bag of other parts. So there are the two motors, the 4 wires for connecting to the motors, the back wheel, the battery holder, and this little bag of all the screws and smaller parts. So when you open this, you pour it out, be careful you don't lose anything. Alright, so what you have in here, you have your on-off switch. You got this 4 plastic tabs here for mounting the motor. This 2 black discs we do not need. Okay, then we have the 4 long screws for mounting the motors. We got the 4 spacers here for mounting the back wheel. And then we have 8 of this type of screws with a little round disc around it. All the nuts are the same. Alright. And then there are just 2 slightly longer screws. So the first thing you want to do is you want to peel off the paper that is stuck on the plexiglass on both sides, and you'll also want to do that for the 4 tabs. So I find it easy to start from this corner here. So you kind of use your fingernail to scrape off the edge here to peel it out. And then once you have a little part peeled off, then you can pull it. You want to gently, but with even pressure, pull the entire thing and try not to get it tear. So I'm just working my way around the left side here, and then I will pull down. When you get to this, it's a little bit tricky because of those holes there. The paper is gonna start to tear around the edges there. And if that happens, you wanna stop right away and try to get the little piece out. Don't let it tear, because once the paper tears, then it's very difficult to remove everything. Alright, there you have it, the first side. And then you turn over and we do the same thing on the other side. Scrape this little piece out, and then you again gently pull with even pressure. right. Now we've got this plexiglass. And then you do the same thing with this 4 tabs here. We just pull this off. And peel it out. Here's the first piece. So again, when it starts to tear, you want to try to reconnect it. Pull the whole piece out. Here's the second piece. And the third. All right, and the last piece. So here they are, 4 pieces. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mount the back wheel. So here's the back wheel. This is the front of the motor, I mean the robot chassis. And here's the back. There are 4 holes here. There are many holes here, but we're going to be using this 4. So if you put this on here, you see which 4 holes we want to use. Okay. So the first thing is we're going to screw in the 4 spacers. So we're going to use this type of screw with that little round disc around it. So I'm going to stick one through from the bottom and then screw in the spacer. Now don't tighten it, keep it loose for now. Okay, so here it is, it's loose. And you do it again for the second one. Okay, again, don't tighten it, keep it loose. See, it wiggles here. And then for the third one, stick the screw in through the bottom and then screw in the spacer. And again, here it wiggles. And the last one. Okay, and it wiggles. All right, now you mount the motor, the back wheel here. Okay, again you put the screw in. You might want to use the screwdriver here. Again, you want to keep it loose. Okay. See, it's completely loose here, because once you tighten it, then it's impossible to get the other screws in. So you want to get all the screws in first before you tighten it. All right. I got all the screws in and they're all loose, as you can see. So now I can tighten all the screws. So I'm going to start from the bottom here, tighten this one, and I do the opposite corner, tighten this one, and then tighten this one. You don't have to tighten it too much, otherwise you'll crack the plastic. Okay, and then turn it over, and I will tighten this side. So tighten one corner, and then tighten the other corner. Make sure you press the wheel down all the way. Okay, so there you have it. So here's the back wheel mounted. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to mount the two motors. Okay, and we're going to be using this plastic tabs here, 2 per motor. Okay, so if you look at this body here, there's this little slot right here. So you're going to push this plastic tab through this slot here. Okay, you want to push it down from the top side. There's the bottom side. So I'm pushing this tab through from the top to the bottom. Okay, and then you can turn it over, lay it on the table. Okay, so the way to place this motor is, so here's this little hole that looks like a cross here, the plus sign. Okay, that's where the axle is going to be. Okay, now on the motor there are just 2 tabs for soldering the 2 wires. You want them to be facing outside. Okay, not the inside but outside. Okay, now there are times where the 2 tabs on the motor, they're a little bit oxidized with brownish color. If that is the case, you need to scrape it off with a utility knife to make it shiny again. Otherwise you can't solder onto it. So let me scrape this off, and you see that it gets shiny. Okay, that's how you want it. Okay, so now it's shiny. Let's do the same thing for the other motor. All right, so I find it much easier if you first position this. Let's see, so this is the way it should be, right? The axle right above the plus sign here, and the 2 soldering tabs, they're facing out. So first I'm gonna push this 2 long screws through another tab, this tab here. Yeah, okay. And then with this on the bottom, I'm going to push it through the 2 holes in the motor here. Push it through, and then you can align it and push it through this other tab that is already on the plexiglass motor. Okay. So make sure this positions correctly right there. All right, hold on to the screws, hold on to this, because right now it's going to fall off if you don't hold on to it. And I'm going to screw this nut on. First, on the top screw here, the top screw is easy. Yeah, okay. Just hand tighten it. The bottom one is a little bit more difficult because it's so close to the plexiglass and you can't spin it. So what I do is I just put the nut right there against the screw, and then I screw it in on the other side with a screwdriver. All Alright, so before you tighten that, make sure this plastic tab here is in position. It's locked in there. Okay, so now we're gonna tighten it, but don't tighten it too much. Okay, you stop when it's right when you can't turn anymore. You stop. Okay, otherwise if you tighten it too much, it's gonna squeeze into the motor and the motor will not turn. Okay, so here's my first motor mounted. Right, so here are the two tabs for connecting the wires. Right, the axle for connecting the wheels here. Right, it's facing the front of the robot. Yeah, so this is the top side and the motor is on the bottom side. So we do the same thing with the second motor. So again, here's the slit. So I'm going to push this tab through the slit, right, from the top to the bottom, and position this motor. So again, here are the connecting tabs on the motor. It got to be facing the outside, yeah, like this. Yeah, oops. As soon as you lift that up, this is going to fall off. Okay, and then with this other tab, you stick the two long screws through the hose, and then stick it through the motor, and push it through the inside tab. And again, make sure it's locked into position. And then you screw the two nuts in. And then the bottom. So again, for the bottom, you hold a nut against the screw, and then you screw in from the other side with a screwdriver. Okay, so again, as soon as it gets tight, that's when you stop. Don't make it too tight. Yeah, there you go. That's good. All right, so now I have both motors mounted. Right, so everything's on the back side, the back wheel, the two motors on the back side, and this is the top. Yeah, okay, so this is the front of the robot, the back of the robot, and the two motors with the two connecting points. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to mount the battery holder. And again, the battery holder is going to be mounted on the bottom side. The bottom side between the two wheels, like this. Okay, the bottom side. But before we want to mount this, I want to cut this red piece of wire first, because after it's mounted, it's difficult to cut. Okay, I'm going to be cutting this red piece of wire because this red piece of wire got to go through the on-off switch so that I can turn on and off the robot. Okay, so you want to cut it at a point about 1 inch from the battery holder. So the battery holder about 1 inch, about this long. Okay, and it's about the thickness of my thumb here. So you're going to use this wire cutter. So the inside part of this wire cutter you can use to cut the wire. And then after we cut the wire, we're going to use one of the holes in here to strip that wire. So there are different sizes of holes here. We'll use hole number 24 to strip it. Okay, so I'm going to cut this about right there. Okay, and then to strip this wire, I'm going to stick this, push this again, this hole 24. If you put it in a bigger hole, then of course it's not going to cut, it's too big. Or if you put it in a smaller hole, it might cut the whole thing. So you put it right there, and you squeeze in tight, and then you pull. and you strip it off. There it is. Okay, you don't want this to be too long, otherwise you have too much wire exposing there. And you do the same thing with the short piece here. So you grab onto this wire, put it in hole 24, about that long. You squeeze the stripper here and you pull. There you go. There it is. That little piece. Alright, so now we're ready to screw this battery holder onto this bottom side of the chassis. And you're going to be using these 2 long screws. Okay, so let me stick the screw in first through the battery holder. Like that. Alright. And just place it on here, and the 2 screws will go to the top of the robot. Okay. Use the 2 remaining nuts. So for this 2 screws, I will need to tighten it a lot. The reason is this screw, it sticks out a little bit, and so the battery will not go in all the way, and so it will keep pop off. So I need to really tighten this so that the screw is squeezed into the plastic. So what I need to do is I need to use a pair of pliers, hold on to the nut on the other side, and then I tighten this and force the screw into the plastic. Right, but don't do it too much, otherwise you'll crack the plastic. Okay, and do the same thing with the other screw. Alright, so you see now the screw is squeezed into the battery holder here. Okay, so it's not in the way of the battery when you put the battery in. Good, that looks good. Alright, now we're ready to put this on-off switch on. So this on-off switch, notice here you got the 2 tabs for soldering the 2 wires, and then there's this empty space here. So what we want to do is we want to put this empty space next to the battery holder so that we have more room to work with. Okay, we're going to push the switch from the top of the robot. Okay, so this is the top of the robot, and on the bottom side, that's where we're going to be connecting the wires. Okay, so on the top of the robot. So again, if you look at the 0 is facing forward and the 1 is facing backward next to the battery holder. Okay, so with this one you have to press it in so that it snaps into place inside the hole. Yep, there you go. So there's the on-off switch. Once you snap it in, it's very difficult to remove. Alright, so now on the bottom side, now we're ready to solder the wires. Okay, so here's my soldering iron. Okay, it takes about a minute for it to heat up. So let me just plug it in. Alright, so the soldering iron is very similar to your glue gun, which I imagine most of you have used. Okay, except we're working with metal rather than plastic. So instead of the glue for the glue gun, I have the solder, which is metal. Okay, and then here's the soldering iron. This is the tip, and this gets very hot, much hotter than your glue gun, because here I'm trying to melt this metal. So make sure you don't touch this metal pot, this entire metal pot. All right, so you hold on to it here. Okay, so wait for it to heat up until it's hot enough to melt this solder. So you can try to touch it with the solder and see whether it melts. Right now it's still not hot enough. All right, let's wait a little bit. So what you want to do is once it's hot enough, okay, so now you can see it's starting to smoke there. Yeah, so now it's hot enough. So if you put some solder on here, see how it melts on there now? Yeah, so this is hot enough. Okay, so when you're doing this, you want to put some solder onto this tab here, and you also want to put some solder onto the wire. Okay, so you want to put some solder onto both parts that you want to join. Okay, to put the solder onto this tab, what you want to do is you want to use the tip here to heat up the tab, and then you apply the solder onto the tab. You don't want to touch the solder onto the tip of the soldering iron here, because otherwise you just put solder on the tip of the iron, and that's not what we want. We want to put the solder onto this tab here. So you want to apply the solder on the tab. So you put the soldering iron onto the tab, heat it up. It only takes a second or two, and then you put the solder on the tab right against the joint there. Okay, you can turn your soldering iron around, and there's my solder. Right, so as you can see, there's this blob of solder melted onto the tab. Okay, and I do the same thing for the other tab. So again, you put the soldering iron onto this tab for a second or two, heat it up, and then you put the solder against the tab here. Okay, when it smokes like that, try not to breathe in the fumes. Just blow it away. Alright, and now I do the same thing. Put some solder onto the wire. So I'm going to do this longer piece first to show you, because it's much easier to work with out here. So again, I heat up the wire and then apply the solder. So if you have somebody else to hold a piece of wire for you, that will be much easier. Otherwise, you gotta grab it like this. Okay, with my two fingers, grab the wire, and then this two finger holding on to the solder. Okay, so you heat up. So I'm heating up, touching it from the bottom side, and then applying the solder on the top side. Yep, there you go. And I try to, the plastic is melted a bit, so I press it back down like that. There you go. That's good. The other end of the wire's already got some solder on, so I don't need to do that. Alright, and now I do the same thing for this short piece of wire. It's a little bit more difficult because it's so short and close to the battery holder. Now we can connect this wire to this tab here, this inside tab, right? So since there's already solder on both the tab and the wire, I don't need to use this anymore. Okay, so again, I place this wire against the tab solder there and just heat it up, and it will melt the solder and it will stick the two together. And then after that, you remove the solder and then you let go of the wire. So here we go. Melt it. There you go. Just melt it. You push the wire against it, remove the solder, and now it's hardened, and now it is tight. Yeah, there you go. And we do the same thing for the other piece of red wire. Just place it right against there and then melt it. There you go. Yeah, as you can see, it only takes a second to heat that up to melt the solder. And as soon as you remove the soldering iron, it solidifies. Okay, that's good. All right, so the next thing is we're gonna do the same thing for the 2 motor wires. So here are the tabs for the motor. Okay, again, I'm gonna put some solder onto them first. Okay, so again, if you have another person to hold on to this robot for you like this, it will be much easier. Otherwise, you gotta hold on to it yourself. All right. So you do the same thing, you heat up the tap and then apply the solder onto the tap. So you gotta move it around so the solder spreads all over. So there it is. And then same thing for the other tap. Yep, there you go. That's a good block. And do the same thing for the other motor. So turn it around. All right, there you have it. Okay, now we're ready to connect the wires to them. All right, so as you can see from the top side, there are just 2 holes. So I'm gonna string the wires through those 2 holes. So I'm gonna do this yellow one first. This yellow one I'm gonna connect to this top tab here. So place this yellow wire and push it just enough so that it's this end piece here is just placed over the tap, because you're going to be soldering that 2 together. All right, so all you need to do is just press down on the wire, and it will at the same time melt the solder that is on the motor tap, and then it will connect the 2 together. So here you go. Press down, it's melting, melt it, and you remove it. And there it is. It's tight. Do the same thing for the black wire. The black wire is going to go to the bottom tab here, so we're going to push it through a little bit longer. Pull it up. Okay. So now with this, we're going to turn it around. Place it, position the wire so that it is right. You bend that there, position so it's right on top of the tab. Okay, so you can hold it down like that. Yep. So again, you're gonna press down on the wire until the solder melts, both the on the wire and on the tab. There you go. And you remove the iron, and it solidifies right away. So there you have it. Okay, the 2 wires. And you do the same thing for the other side. Yellow wire through this hole. There are the 2 holes. Good. And the black wire. All right. So now I got those 4 wires connected. Okay. Now for this 2 battery wires here, I'm going to string it through from the bottom to the top through this hole here. String it through to the top. Okay. So just pull it all the way so there are no slacks. Alright, now the next thing that I need to do is I need to solder the connection pins onto the ends of the 6 wires. So this strip of pins that came from the Arduino bag. Remember when you open the Arduino bag, there was this little strip. Alright, so I'm going to put this paper pad here so that I don't burn the table. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to connect each pair of wires. Okay, we're going to use 4 pins here with 2 pins in the middle. So I'm going to connect one wire to this end pin here, and then the second wire, and then with to the 4th pin over. So 2 pin gap in the middle. Okay. Now I don't want to break off this 4 pins yet, because when you break it off with this 4 pins, it's hard to work with. So I'm going to solder it on first before I break it. Okay. And again, before I solder, I need to put some solder on to the pins here. Okay, so you can hold it down like this. So I'm going to put some solder onto this first pin. So again, you heat up the pin and then you apply the solder. And this one, because it's so small, it's going to heat up really fast. So you heat up, apply the solder, remove. And there's the solder on there. Okay, do the same thing for the 4th pin over. So you skip 2 pins and then you do it on the 4th pin, right? So again, you apply this heat, put the solder, and remove. And I'm gonna do it for the remaining 2 pairs at the same time now. So next pin over, apply the heat, solder, remove. Skip 2 pins, apply the heat, solder, remove. Alright, so that's the second pair. For the last pair, same thing. Next pin over. Apply the heat, solder, remove. Skip 2 pins, apply the solder, heat, solder, remove. There you go. Alright, so now I'm ready to solder the wires on. Okay, so this one, black and yellow. So it doesn't matter whether you place the black here or here, it doesn't matter, but so it makes sense to put it in over on the left side because it's on the left. Okay, so hit, melt the solder, remove. Because I already got solder on there now, so it's easier to work with. Same thing with the yellow. You position it first, apply the heat, it melts, and then you remove. And now it's tight. Yeah? And then I break it off to break it off. So make sure you break at the right place. This 4th one here, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4th one. So there's this little gap here, this notch. So you can put your fingernail through that and there, and you just snap it off. Right there. So you have this. So there are 4 pins, 2 in the middle, the gap, right? 2 wires are soldered on each side. Alright, you do the same thing for the other 2 pairs. So let me do this battery one. So position the wire against the pin, and then you apply the heat. It melts the solder, and you remove. Don't let go of the wire until it solidifies, otherwise the wire will just not connect it. Just come off. Alright, so position the wire, melt. Okay, there you go. And then you snap off. Okay, same thing, 4 pins. Okay, the last pair, turn it around. And we do the same thing. All right, last one. So position the wire, apply the heat, melt, and remove. There you go, and that's tight. That's good. And then you snap this off. And there you have it. Make sure you don't touch the tip of the iron, otherwise you burn yourself. Be careful with that. Alright, so I got this 3 pairs of wires. This pair for this motor, this pair for this motor, and this pair for the battery. There's the on-off switch, the battery holder, back wheel. Okay, the last thing is to mount the 2 wheels here. So, you can see that there's only one way that it can go in. So position it correctly. Alright, so there's the round end and then the straight end. Just push it in. There you go. Make sure it spins. And do the same thing for the other one. There's the round end and the straight end. So just match it. There's the round end and the straight end. Press it in and it spins. And that's it. There's your robot chassis. Finished product.